Hello, everyone. Welcome to, to my talk. I hope it's fun for you. I want to thank you very much for the invitation to be here. It's a real pleasure to talk to someone else, and it always seems embarrassingly flattering to have a chance to talk about your own work. It feels like a privilege. So thank you for your interest. Please do speak up if there's a problem with the PowerPoint, if you can't see or if you can't hear me. Maybe I've turned away from the microphone or something like that. Don't be polite, interrupt straight away. Let me know so I can do it better. And Julie, can I trust you to keep an eye on time for me as well too? Marvelous, thank you. And do intervene when we're getting toward the question part. Okay, so I'll share my presentation for you now. Here goes. Great, I'll go into presentation mode on that.
Looks good.
So should be there. There we are. So we've got the whole thing, and I will indeed deal in some way with this title in a moment. But let me get you first into the subject itself, and then I'll come back to that interesting and sort of pungent word KalaOK and try and explain what's happening there. I wanted to say first of all that the research for this paper was mostly carried out in a small village known as Bukavu or Wellington. Most of the locals are Bunun people, and they mostly would speak Bunun among themselves if they're of an older generation. The younger generations, maybe 50 or 60 and below, would speak Mandarin Chinese or Goyu, national language, as it's often called in Taiwan there. And so they'd be more likely to use the name Wellington, which is the kind of Mandarin language title for that. So a few words on the Bunun themselves. And by the way, I at one time I had a query on this map itself. I should say, of course, China is actually much bigger than this. So this is just a little bit of coastline that sort of fits near to Taiwan itself. But obviously, it's a big country. Somebody once said I should put the whole of China in. But if I do that, Taiwan is too small to be visible in terms of the sort of villages and so on. So the Bunun are one of, I think it's now 16 formally recognized indigenous peoples in Taiwan. Their ancestors were speakers of Austronesian languages, and some of them still are today. And they inhabited the island for several thousand years before Han settlers began to migrate to Taiwan from China. That's a movement with a very, very long history itself, but it occurred only in really large numbers over the last 400 years or so. Bunun migration into central Taiwan, and they began, apparently according to their own memories, around this area called Nantou here, but by today they've sort of spread across the shaded part. And of course, you can meet Bunun probably in Finland and Australia and so forth as well today. Their movement southwards and into the mountains of southeast Taiwan may have occurred in connection with Dutch colonization in the mid-17th century. The Dutch paid good money for the hides of deer, and the local people, who in that time were still predominantly indigenous minorities, they were good hunters, and so they chased the deer. And as one set of deer ran out in one area, that the Bunun and the others may have migrated to follow that rather rich prey further into the mountains and so on. The Bunun lived in settlements of just a few families traditionally, and it was primarily a hunter-gatherer way of life. That it gave symbolic importance to head hunting. Observation of taboos guarded the people against the occurrence of ill fortune. Sung rites were an important means for them to seek good luck in whatever action might be proposed. So the idea was you would sing about something, and if it went well, you would go ahead and do that thing. But if it didn't go well, that was a warning from the spirits that you probably shouldn't do that thing, and you'd have to revisit your plans. Taiwan was handed by the Chinese government, or the Manchu government, the Qing government, the Qing dynasty, to Japan in 1895. And that led to a lengthy period of domination by Imperial Japan. The Japanese, in some ways, were much more present in the lives of the indigenous peoples than many of the Han settlers had been before. The Han settlers had often grouped up on the western part of the island or around the coast, but the Japanese were determined to kind of conquer and control the whole of the island, and they even moved a kind of security wall gradually down the island as they pacified each part. The Bunun were forcibly settled in villages around the edges of their former hunting grounds, and they were obliged by their colonial masters to take up a more sedentary lifestyle with a greater reliance upon agriculture. So this just gives you a little bit of a sense of different images. The first picture on the top left, a rather striking image, is of Bunun from around about 120 years ago. So it's quite an early anthropological photograph. But notice in there, a couple of the figures have got Chinese dresses on. This lady's carrying an umbrella that clearly was made outside the village area. That's a sort of signs already of culture contact for that. There's also some talk that the photographer quite liked the men in his photos to look tough and sort of ready for trouble and so forth. And so he's famous for having a lot of pictures of very unsmiling, unhappy, sort of serious looking, different exotic peoples. Practices like headhunting were forbidden at this time. The Japanese language acquisition was enforced. And these restrictions continued under the Chinese Nationalist Party, the Kuomintang, in 1945 onwards, when the mainland Chinese government regained control of Taiwan. Mandarin, of course, replaced Chinese at that time. And it's really only in the last 2 decades that mother tongue programs and cultural roots movements have emerged among the Bunun and the other indigenous peoples in Taiwan. Taiwan has generally achieved very high standards of living for its people. But Bunun regularly report facing prejudice from their Han neighbors, who are a great majority. Bunun are about 50,000 or so people, whereas the whole of Taiwan is 22 million or thereabouts, so there's a huge difference in proportion. And many still describe their situation as marginal and disadvantaged. Let me give you a couple of statistics. Indigenous males in Taiwan live 13.5 years less than Han males who might live alongside them, statistically speaking. Indigenous females, 8.4 years less than their Han neighbors. Only 6% of the indigenous people in Taiwan have received a tertiary education, whereas 26% of the settler population have been able to benefit from that. So there's still some significant differences which are going to take a long while to catch up on through. Bunun today are heavily Sinicized, heavily impacted by Chinese culture of various kinds, but they're also strongly missionized. And there are both Catholic and Presbyterian churches in many of their villages. This is one in Bukavu itself. This is a Presbyterian church. The Bunun in this sense are doubly colonized, and each of these presences impinges massively on their indigenous cultural traditions. Although it is worth adding that the churches have also been significant forces in cultural sustainability programs for several decades now, and the church in some ways had power to stand up to the state, even when other people within the state couldn't do so. So the church, for instance, could publish church songs at a time in Bunun language, at a time when other publishers couldn't publish stuff in Bunun language. More recently, local government and national government have also joined in programs of cultural sustainability. So the situation is certainly a fluid one. Okay, so this brings us to this KalaOK Nights, and what am I doing here? I wanted to say, first of all, this is a really remarkable name, and it in some ways, this is just a summary of the whole talk that I'm going to give today. I asked contacts in Bukavu, is there a Bunun word for karaoke? And they thought that was a very funny question. What a silly question. And of course, they're quite right. Here on the side, you can see three sort of ways of writing this. So this is the way that it would normally be written on a sign outside a place where you could sing this in Taiwan, or at least in Bunun areas of Taiwan. That's how it would sound if we sort of romanized that and turned it into alphabetical letters. And this is the sort of root word which comes from Japanese itself. So you can see this one is pronounced ka, this one is la, okay, it's sort of borrowed from English. So let me run you through that, and then you've got Japanese sort of versions of what this means underneath. And I'll refer to each of these components gradually. The expression that's used here, the Mandarin expression KalaOK, or at least mostly Mandarin, is a wonderful hybrid. It begins with two phonetic Chinese characters, ka and la, and it's based on Karaoke, but ra isn't available in Mandarin Chinese, so la is the next nearest alternative. And then the term is rounded off with okay, written in Latin letters. It's actually very unusual to find a mix of Chinese and Latin letters in a single word like this. It happens in internet slang as well, but I haven't seen it in many other places. You'll be aware probably that kara means empty, and it stems from a Chinese loanword which is pronounced kong in Mandarin. So it's interesting that when Chinese borrowed this word karaoke, which had been borrowed from kind of Japanese and English squished together in a Japanese term, they didn't actually translate it back then. They could have called it kong okay, that would have made sense. Or even kong yuedui. Yuedui is the Chinese word for orchestra. So they didn't translate it back, they just imitated the sound of it. And I like that because karaoke is all about imitating the sound. So there's something quite nice that the word already begins to perform its own meaning. Karaoke is also famous for providing songs, at least in Taiwan, in a range of different languages. And so when you're in a karaoke booth, you can pick up perhaps a booklet or a guide, and you can flick through songs in Taiwanese, songs in Mandarin, songs in Japanese, probably a few songs in English, and sometimes some other languages as well. So what we end up with here is this sort of phoneticized imitation of a Japanese word, which is a translation of a Chinese word squished into an English word. So it's quite a sort of hybrid, mongrelized term. It's a naughty word by the sort of rules of Chinese orthography. You shouldn't write a word with sort of half English characters, as it were, and half Chinese characters. So it's a really interesting, playful, transgressive construction. I suppose that's what I'm saying there. And that's totally appropriate to the idea of karaoke as a song form where you take somebody else's voice and you fill your voice in on top of a pre-existing song, and of course you can change the lyrics and be transgressive and so forth with that. And all of this is general to Taiwan and other parts of the Sinophone world, of course. So what's specific and different to Bunun practices in this is that in Taiwan you can find quite a range of different types of karaoke establishments, and these go from big ones, which are sometimes called KTV, where customers will go in and hire a kind of booth, a private room, and then sort of party in there themselves while singing karaoke, through to mobile businesses who will turn up if you're having a party in your house and lend you the equipment for a night or whatever. In Bukavu, there are 3 karaoke businesses, and what they've done in each case is just add a small room on the side of a grocery shop or something like that. And people can go there and put money into a coin slot to start up the machine and then sing the song that they want to sing. A US writer, Rob Drew, has written a book called KalaOK Nights, and I'm partly paying homage to him through my title here. And in his book, he writes about US karaoke bars, which are a bit more public than most of the events in Bukavu. But karaoke is also performed, as in this case, at weddings. So here was a wedding in the village. You can see the double happiness symbol behind the ladies here. And guests at the wedding would be entitled to come up and sing a song. I think the first person to sing was a local politician who knew that it was smart to be seen at the event itself. But then after that, other relatives came forward and took their turns to sing. Here are a couple of sisters who are friends of the groom, if I remember correctly. So it quite quickly, everybody was able to have a go if they wanted to do that. You can see the back of the monitor there, and you can see the sound man over there making sure all is well. Rob Drew writes as follows: the performers on stage are likely to appear altogether ordinary, and that makes them, as on-stage performers go, extraordinary. If you hang around long enough, someone will get up on the stage, and at some point she'll hit a tough note, render a poignant lyric with the right twist. The crowd will cheer, and she'll take the cue to push further. Suddenly she'll possess the song and be possessed by it. So some fantastic transformations can occur in the course of karaoke singing. When I began to ask people in the village about their musical lives, karaoke was a topic that came up nearly all the time. It was one of the main places where people in the village sang together. Many of them went once or twice a week to sing karaoke with their friends. It was a social occasion, very much more than a musical occasion, I think you could say. The only thing that rivaled it was actually singing in the church. So these were the two big occasions, and there was a sort of polarity between Sunday mornings where you sang in a certain way, and Friday nights, if you like, or Saturday nights when you sang in a certain other kind, a set of ways. Observers talking to me explained that karaoke was mostly a good thing. It was fun. They wouldn't want to live without it, but that it brought some problems with it too, and that there were dangers and risks that it brought to the village. Here's a lady called Ibu who was talking about trying to set up a karaoke business with her family. And she had previously said to me, you could make a lot of money doing this if everything goes right. And she gave an example of what she meant. But then she went on to the darker side of it, she said, which is that people don't take their clothes off or burst into tears. They would get drunk and their emotions would come out in ways that were a little bit uncontrollable. The younger people would get into arguments, you know, and presumably these arguments over relationships and that kind of thing. And also a lot of the younger people, she said, they were chancers. They would come and say, I'll pay you tomorrow, just let me sing first, that kind of thing. And because they were friends or family friends and so on, it was very hard to say, no, you money, or no money, no sing. It was hard to say that. But then, of course, they never turned up to pay the money back and so on. So in this case, she said she let the business go after a while. It was too hard to keep going. Others who struggled with this said things like, you can make money, but you've got to go on late into the night. And then your neighbors complain because you're making sound all the time. And it's an agricultural place, so people get up early to go tend their fields. So there are kind of opportunities, but risks for social things too. And I'm mostly going to move on from the negative side, but I wanted to put it in there because music researchers often take music as a good thing and they assume it's great and it's lovely. And if everybody in society musiced more, we'd all be happy people. And that can be true, but it's not always true. Music like karaoke can be a venue for bullying. It can be a place where humiliation is heaped upon others. Sexual aggression, of course, can occur there. Songs can be about incitement to racism or violence or whatever. So music can be a bad thing in some cases. Let's acknowledge that. But let's look at an event and just see a bit about what's going on in a typical sort of village encounter. It's July 28th, 2005, and one of our neighbors, Bali, and his wife, Abus, have been talking with a lady about setting up a new business. They're partners from out of town, so they want to show her the delights of the village, and they decide to take her to a karaoke business so that they can do a bit of singing together. And that's, I think, a fairly standard thing to do when you're holding business discussions, is to find a chance to socialize and really get to know the quality of the person that you're going into business with. They walk to Ijong's karaoke business, and Ijong is a distant cousin of Bali, and they find that there's already another group who are singing in the main room outdoors. So they head indoors where there's a smaller space for the more serious singers. It's a bit more soundproofed. And they sing in there for a while, but they keep getting attracted back to the big group outside, because the big group outside seems to be having a wild time and a huge amount of fun. Let's just see a tiny little clip of that. And apologies for the shaky camera. So a few words on what you just saw, and those of you who are students in Julie's class, you might have been learning one of those songs, so hopefully that was a nice reminder for you of that cute melody. So some of the things that you saw and that you heard there was a woman singing at the beginning. The red shirt man, I'll call him that just to avoid using names, is dancing the twist, and he's stepping from foot to foot with his knees bent, perhaps as if he's on skis. His arms are up and away from his body, bent at the elbow. He's shaking his bottom. Voices are calling out in delighted acclaim. He waves, and there's a louder cry of approval. His wave is mirrored by the orange shirt man, who's then mirrored by the white top woman, so that the intergroup movements are important here. The singer is gradually revealed as a woman with a tiger stripes top, and she's standing near the table's foot away on the right on the screen as we look at it now. Spotting the camera, bare top man briefly joins in the dance before taking a seat. He shows he can do it, but he's mostly not going to do it now. Tiger stripes woman nods her head rapidly to each beat in the instrumental. She's trying to sort of keep up in her place and not lose her next verse. Black top woman, meanwhile, is intent on the song catalogue. She's perhaps the next singer and is trying to work out what to sing. Some of those seated raise their hands and clap. Orange shirt man takes up the second mic and joins in the singing. He's got a good voice, that guy, and we could hear the melody much more clearly once he joined it. He rocks a little from side to side with each two beats. Red top man takes his seat, but he's still moving vigorously. White top woman, perhaps his partner, appears to be trying to slap him into a more settled state. She's noticed the camera there too, and is perhaps not sure it's in his best interest for him to be shown to be such a silly guy. The film jumps to a second segment in the same song, so a verse and a half or so later, and a group of customers are just passing by from the adjoining shop, and you see the last man lingering a bit as if he'd like to actually pause and join in the party before he regretfully goes off to work. Finally, tracksuit woman emerges from the inner room and starts to twist as the outro plays, and she fits a remarkable set of moves into a few short seconds. She does the potato masher, you perhaps saw that with the hands going up and down, and she's perfectly timed to the track. It's quite virtuosic, actually. She points upward to a final shout of acclaim from the observer. So melodically, what's happening here is sort of set and memorized by the song, but the dance movements are things that the people, of course, can improvise. There isn't a guide for them on the screen for that. And it's interesting here that all of them chose to do a dance that's older than they are. The twist is a dance that comes from the US in the late 1950s, and it's spread rapidly to the Western world, and obviously it's endured since then. Its moves include swiveling the hips as if extinguishing a cigarette or something like that on the floor. And it works very well in informal situations because you can dance with somebody, or you can dance on your own, or you can dance towards somebody who's perhaps across the room from you. So it's quite a versatile dance in that way. The learning of dance moves from another continent and from a former generation is fostered by the mediation of commercially oriented karaoke technology and the play or replay that it engenders. But this doesn't mean that karaoke in Bukavu is all about nostalgia or pastiche. And in a moment, I'll give you an example of a younger Bunun who learnt an older song in order to present it as a gift to her mum. We'll come back to that in a second. We also should consider the tangibly physical fun of learning and replicating dances like the twist. I think you can see from this is a huge amount of fun to do with your friends. And so that there's something that's very enjoyable, which is about the here and now, not about the there and then. It's not about the 1950s when you do it. It's about you having fun right now. And about your friends having fun, observing you having fun. And there's a lot of reciprocation in the performance of this. Here's a second example. So it's August the 8th, which is Father's Day. It's the 8th day of the 8th month, which sounds like Baba, which means father in Chinese. And a group of family and friends have met to celebrate at a restaurant, which happens to have a karaoke machine. So I'm going to run you through a few of the things that happen, and you can see the dynamics again of this kind of event. There'll be lots of people's names in the next paragraph or two, don't worry at all. Those present are Nabu, his wife Lala, Zhongzheng, Zhongcheng, Lanihu, and two of his ganmeme, essentially a kind of little sister, but a sort of fictional little sister, if that makes sense. Not imaginary people, but people where the relationship is perhaps more asserted than bloodline. Also, Abus is there and her daughter. We're at the Purple Light Resort, and Lanihu works there in the sales department, so he's going to come and join us. We go to the restaurant. Abus is already there singing karaoke. She's warming up. She means business. Zhongzheng joins her too. They're singing a song by an army musician, Zhang Zhenyue. It's actually quite rare for Bunun to sing songs by other indigenous groups in Taiwan, but on this occasion it did happen. As we wait for Lanihu to join us, the kitchen staff are pressing us to order some dishes. They don't care that our main guest of honor hasn't come yet. They just want to start making money. We ask them to wait another 2 minutes, and Lanihu appears. He leads us in a prayer. He likes to say grace before things are done. And then he cuts the cake, and then he hands the knife to Nabu, who also cuts the cake. And these are the two guys who are fathers in that setting, so they have the honor of doing that, of course. And then Lanihu reaches into a pocket and pulls out $500, 500 Taiwan dollars. It's about 12 or 15 euros, I suppose. And hands it to Zhongzheng, says, go get some money. Zhongzheng gets the money. He gets it converted into coins, which they're going to feed into the karaoke machine whilst they eat and sing. Zhongzheng chooses some songs. He likes new songs. He likes Wubai the Rocker and Tang Zhenyue, we already mentioned. The others, though, all go for the old songs. So there's an alternation across the event of old material and new, and choices. Lanihu's so-called sister picks a song by Cui Taiqing, and she explains she heard somebody else sing it at karaoke. She didn't know it at all, but she thought it sounded great. So she persuaded them to sing it again 2 or 3 times immediately, to the chagrin of other listeners nearby. But then she managed to learn it. And now she can sing a second harmonizing part. And she loves this song. It's one of her favorites. So she does it. Neither Lala nor Nabu will sing. The moment doesn't arrive for them. And Nabu modestly says, let's let others play. I'm happy to watch. And Lala says, I wouldn't dare do it. But because I used to sing in church, then I got the courage gradually to sing, which is an interesting thought. So church singing has sort of inspired sometimes karaoke singing. And then they go off to talk about other villagers who are great at singing, and they praise one another and they encourage one another to take turns. Zhongzheng is getting really into it. He's singing very high up. now with a penetrating tone. He's really engaged. He's hitting all the rhythmic cadences. His voice and body reveal his full absorption in the emotions of the song. Abus selects an old song, The Moonlight Represents My Heart, which I think some of you guys know how to sing as well. Teresa Dung, or Dung Lijun favorite. And she sings it with her daughter. My postdoc wrote in her notes that she was surprised that Abus's daughter knew how to sing that song. That song is way older than the daughter. Again, it's really 2 generations before. The daughter explains that she learnt it so that she could surprise her mum as a birthday gift one day. So she learnt it secretly so that she could then sing it to make her mum feel happy. She knew it was her mum's favorite song from her childhood. So that gives you a sense of the informal interactions in and around singing and the social business of singing in a place like Bukavu. And much activity is like this. Participants meet in cross-generational groupings, and they're often with their friends and family members. But there's openness to relatively newly acquainted people, like the occasional visiting researcher. Karaoke's turn-taking configuration allows this all to happen. It gives people time to get habituated with each other, to share songs and to share emotions, to share memories, to build interpersonal regard through the expression of appreciation for one another. Sometimes you can actually compliment a singer, whereas you perhaps wouldn't compliment a stranger in other ways, but you can compliment somebody because they sang well. Singing and listening stimulate those to think about the days of their youth, or absent relatives or present relatives. So there can be quite powerful interactions where singing becomes a gift, or indeed singing becomes an inheritance, where you take on a song that your uncle used to sing and you kind of sing it as a memorization of him, a memorialization of him. And of course, when we're talking about gifts and inheritances, we're getting toward ethical areas of singing and human interaction. And then, of course, the emotional expression has to match the ethics of that. Otherwise, you come across it or judged as inauthentic or insincere. At this event, the singing enriched familial relationships, friendships, and new acquaintances. But there was also some hierarchy at play. The 2 fathers were the only guys who got to cut the cake, for instance. Lanihu was the guy who handed over the money. He was the oldest man present. He very likely picked up the bill for the dinner on everybody's behalf as well. The costs weren't huge, but still $500 was a decent chunk of his weekly pay. And so he was still being generous as a patron of the event there. It was a generous thing. And so he could anticipate accruing some respect and acknowledgement in future social interactions as a result. Okay, so just a few observations or conclusions that we can pull together from this, that the technology is allowing people to play together. It's also allowing them to go beyond the possibilities of their voice and their memory. So the words are cued on the screen, so you don't have to have memory slips when you've got a karaoke machine nearby. The microphone makes your voice bigger and better, perhaps, than it really is. And so you become a better singer through the thing, and you can enjoy the feeling of being a better singer, and those around you can enjoy the feeling of that. But of course, holding the microphone gives you plenty of opportunities for play, for nudges and winks and smiles and things that turn the song into something a little bit special, a little bit different. And that happens in the dance actions as well. A lot of transgression occurs through the ways that people dance to or with one another, or at perhaps with one another. And that means karaoke in this village is a really multi-sensory experience. It's at least as much about movement and about the positional relationships between people as it is about the melody that somebody's singing at any one time. We heard that there's a multicultural repertory at play here. It's been accumulated over time, but it allows a kind of temporary time travel through song. So suddenly you're back in the 1950s or the 1970s by choosing a particular repertory. And I've mentioned gifting and inheritance in that discussion too. There are many chances in this setting for people to make themselves through performance to show what kind of person they really are, to show the quality of their personal choices in a communal setting. And so many people in the village love karaoke because it allows them to show everybody else kind of what they're made of, show their qualities and so on. Some shy people there would rather sit and watch, though, of course, as everywhere else. And dancing important, crucially, dance and movement crucially important. Let me show you just one other tiny clip of, this is a gathering for the 1 month celebration of a new baby in the house that's behind what we're seeing. So this is the party that people put on, and you'll see the machine at play. Okay, and even the dog is getting in on the act in that picture. So to draw a kind of conclusion from this, although in some ways it's just material that talks for itself. An author called Jeff Titan has, in recent writings, laid out the idea of the sound community. And Titan says he offers a theoretical model that maybe helps us explain or understand what's at stake for the Bunun when they're musicking together in these ways. He proposes that sound communities sustain co-presence in sound. They do that within frameworks of a sound economy, at least ideally they would, a sound politics and a sound ecology. At least that's the ideal system that would be happening around anybody involved in music. And from this perspective, when karaoke dancers move into sync with one another, then positive relationships are developed by the emerging experience of a hitherto unrealized but deeply feelingful we, a sense of connection. The same when two people sing together. But of course, we need to remember that Bunun subjects come to the act of karaoke performance deeply embedded in a political setting and economy that treats them as less deserving of being heard or seen or valued than their Han majority neighbors. So even the most efficacious moments of karaoke-induced rapture are going to be brief and provisional, fugitive visions of a sound community. Perhaps that's the way it always is. Speaking with one of the elderly gentlemen in the village, Dahai, he said to us, you know, in the old days, he's talking about when he was about 10 or so, just before the Japanese enforced settlement. In the old days, there was no singing without drinking. So he's not talking about karaoke, he's talking about traditional Bunun group singing. Collective singing and collective drinking provided a fundamental cultural practice of reflexive deliberation. It's not exactly his words, but this is what he told us. And vocal play embraced religious divination, the checking of the taboos, and leisure. It encouraged social formation and it ordered daily life. People sang together, they decided what to do, and then they went off to do it. In its own and perhaps unlikely way then, karaoke is bridging former and contemporaneous ways of being Bunun in the world today. Unlikely as it may seem, it seems to have fallen onto particularly rich roots in this location. Cool. So I'm going to leave it there because I think I've been talking for a long, long while.